Welcome to Agenda. As I said earlier, we're discussing 25 years of the Fourth Republic, progress and prospects. Let's introduce our guests for tonight. To my immediate left, I have Professor Nana Esirufi Kundia, who is a political historian and chair of journalism at the African University College of Communications. I also have next to him Professor Clement Jidonu, who is president of the Accra Institute of Technology, AIT. And next to him also I have Professor Bafo Ajimaindria, who is the chief executive officer of the John Agyekum Kufuor Foundation and former senior advisor of the United Nations missions in Liberia. Gentlemen, great to have you. It's a privilege. Happy New Year, and rightly so. Let me begin with Professor Ajimaindria. Is it worth celebrating 25 years of the Fourth Republic? Anything worth celebrating at all?
Of course. I mean, if we have come 25 years without what used to be the usual upheavals against
upheavals of military takeovers,
exactly.
Disruption of the Constitution,
and all. For 25
and all.
years we haven't had that. I think we have every reason to celebrate. That is not to say that there have been any serious challenges. In fact, in your earlier introduction, you made a reference to the whole notion of republic, whether the name republic is really being lived to, by the people. I think one of the downsides of our republican system is that not much debate and thought was really driven towards the formulation of the Constitution, the Republican Constitution. In the sense that if you recall other historical experiences of constitutional drawing, democratic constitution, I should say, you realize that there was heated debates in terms of how we constitute the Republican state. First of all, a republic means a country where sovereignty lies with the people, not with the leaders or those who are elected or selected into office. So Republican systems normally have what you call the people-centered political system. The people are supreme. But if you look at our constitution, you realize that in so many ways, the opposite is there.
The leadership
exactly.
is supreme.
Leadership, exactly. And that really undermines a Republican state as it should have been conceived. Secondly, if you recall the Americans, when they were debating towards their own independence in 1776, drawing their constitution, you also realize that much of the discussions on what one may call the value or ethical dimensions of republicanism. In other words, there's a vast difference between declaring yourself a Republican state and the behavior expected of those who are elected or selected into office. In our case, it's clear that we have all the prerequisites in terms of the institutions and other things that we needed to create. We have them. But the downside is that we do not have those ethical dimensions imposed on those who are put in leadership.
And is this a challenge, or you could say that it's an infraction from what the norm should have been?
It's both. It's a challenge because today, in fact, since this republic, and in fact, you even go back to the beginning of our independence, it's clear that the issue of corruption, for instance, which is nothing more than ethical behavior, has been with us. And the reason, or one of the key reasons for the overthrow of all governments that we have had, one of them was what? Corruption. And of course, maladministration of the economy. So if corruption had been persistent all this while, and the management of our resources and other things are also a problem, then these will raise a critical question about what kind of behavior do we expect from our political leaders. That has not been a major discussion for us. And I'm thinking as we transcend the first 25 years, the issue of ethics in public life should be one of the key issues that all of us should pick up. Otherwise, our efforts to combat corruption and all of that will yield nothing to us. So all I'm saying is that, yes, it's been a wonderful experience for this country. As you rightly said, Ghana is now highly regarded in the Committee of Nations. because of our success in stabilizing our democracy and for 25 years having no major upheaval, and also relatively our constitutional institutions working well. But there is certain serious side that we need to now begin.
So we shouldn't be judged by all those, just those nice things they say.
Oh, there have been so many nice things, but there are so many ugly things too that we need to bring to the table henceforth for us to deal with. Because for me, one of the drawbacks in our efforts to progress has been the inability of our leaders to be ethical. Because if you are, some of the challenges that we have, especially regarding the management of our resources, will not be there. And I don't believe even our religious bodies that are supposedly the citadel of morality and ethics are even doing any job on that. I don't believe so.
Professor Kondia, I'd like us to go through some of the historical antecedents from when Ghana made a decision through the referendum to get the fourth Republican Constitution. When I'm asking you this question as a political historian also. When we look back at the history that informed our arrival at that point and where we have come 25 years on, what lessons are we supposed to carry with us to help us improve all the kind of negatives that Professor Agyemang-Duah has thrown light on?
Thank you. You're asking me then to go back to the history. Of course, the genesis of every anniversary is most important. So how did we start? We started from a British or colonial inheritance of what I call them and us, that is government and the opposition. We trudged on into a point where it was decided, as he rightly said, by the leadership, not by country, that we should turn into the republic. The idea was virtually imposed, even though there were opposition. We went to a referendum. The majority of the country, I mean, you can always hear that the electoral processes will always give you some kind of perfidy. So with the benefit of some insight, you would say that there was probably a little bit of more than gerrymandering the yes as against the no's, albeit we would turn into a republic. And Nkrumah himself explained it. He was flogged very badly, brought by Fleet Street in particular, therefore you'll remember. And Fleet Street, of course, we've got to understand, was absolutely conservative dominated. And the conservatives were not prepared, as a matter of fact, to give any of the independence yet. And that was that was general attitude. Two, the personal against Kwame Nkrumah, because it was said that he was a communist, which was not proven. But in any case, within the context of those two allegations or objections, you realize that at that time, in those years, the Cold War had made it so possible that, as far as the West was concerned, any mention of the red would really raise hairs to such an extent that if you're not careful, therefore you had a Senator McCarthy, didn't you, in the States going around checking every baby cot, so to speak, if there was a red under a newborn baby's cot. At the end, of course, he was shown to have been phony and he was thrown out by the Republicans, and that was the end of McCarthyism and the Reds. But that being the case, we went into a Republican state, and Nkrumah said that he thought that the face of Her Majesty on the currency we used, and his people being majority not red, would be asking questions. We say we are independent. Why is it that Oba Ahima pick remains on our notes? So that was a big advantage for him to propagate that. And then he also said that it was because that if we still stayed in the condition of the British that we inherited, might remain or be seen to be dependent on Britain. Some parts of the Constitution, as was handed down in 1957, in fact, gave some powers, external, unseen powers, to the colonial office. All the same, besides, you remember that the going Republican had come into vogue. India, Pakistan, after the partition, went Republican. Now, you also recall that Verwoerd in South Africa had wanted to go Republican, and it led to South Africa being thrown out. There's an interesting story that whereas Sir Robert Menzies, the Australian Prime Minister, was not too clear about whether they should let South Africa go or not in 1961, they had to let South Africa go. South Africa was ejected. Now, the persons who led it were Nehru and Kwame Nkrumah, with Ayub Khan. So immediately when Kwame Nkrumah turned to want to become a republic, Robert Menzies has it in his book that he disrespected Kwame for that. But somehow, time by 1965, Robert had become Kwame Nkrumah's best friend. And indeed, but for Robert Menzies' intervention, Harold Wilson would not have granted the establishment of the Commonwealth Secretariat. It was Robert Menzies who kind of brokered it. And indeed, Robert Menzies had brokered Ghana establishing a mission, a high commission in South Africa, even in those years. You understand it? Somewhere along the line, it went down. So the reason for us becoming a republic that we should show ourselves having become very sovereign, and indeed that we are. What have we done, you say? Yes, it was in consonance with the trend of the time. Those ought to be accepted as given, but what have we done with it? We've trudged on. The situation, as Balfour said, has not been all that bed of roses, but the important thing is that we have come this far, and we're still groping on the economic level, on the political level, on social and levels, and we can zero in on the fact of corruption, or we will call it, in terms of decent language, ethical misconduct of the succession of leaderships that we've had in this country. But I think that I agree in total that if we had discussed the whole status and we had agreed virtually, even by virtue of MOU, verbal MOU, to have written a job description, perhaps job description for our leaderships, that is, we might have had some yardstick to judge them by and therefore hold them onto it. But we haven't got it, so we've turned this country since then into a stop-go country outside of the stop-go economy. And while my consolation is in that populist signature tune, we are going, heaven knows where we're going, but we know we will be there.
Professor Jidonu, let me take you from the leadership angle Professor Kondia ended on. Would you say political leadership has been able to successfully steer the development of this country to something we can celebrate, or you could say that it's still within the stormy waters by the approaches they've adopted so far?
Yep. Good. I want to wish your viewers Happy New Year, and my colleagues here Happy New Year. And that 2018 should bring us great things. Yes, you talk about political leadership. I would like to put that within the context of three dimensions vis-a-vis the Fourth Republic, what he brought to us, good or bad. There's first what my colleagues call the political democratic dispensation angle to it. That's the first part. For that one, I would say all Ghanaians, not only the politicians, political leaders, as Professor Jimandiwa pointed out, It's not really the political leadership, but we Ghanaians, we deserve to clap for ourselves. That on that score, the political system, democratic dispensation, the governance issue, I think we've done very, very well. If someone was born at the beginning of the Fourth Republic, by now he should have been 25 years old. Yeah. In the history of most nations, 25 years is a long time to bring about major change. Malaysia did what they did within 25 years. Singaporean did it within that period. The South Korean did it. All these people used to be our classmates.
So we should be measuring ourselves.
Well, certainly, no question about that. No question about that. When you go back to the great man in Nkrumah, most of what Nkrumah did, he did it within 10 years. Okay, and we still have evidence of that. So when you say 25 years in the life of a nation, that's a long, long, long time.
And you don't think we have much to show for?
Well, on the political dispensation, democratic this thing, I've already said that we all deserve to clap for ourselves, not just the political guys. The next perspective for me is a developmental perspective. I'm glad that Prof is here. The developmental perspective, and the next one is what I call the transformative perspective, that is social and economic transport, this thing. For that one, I beg that we sit on our hands. We haven't done very well. I don't think there will be any clapping here. So, and I will pin that squarely first on the head of the political leadership. They have not shown leadership. If you look at what they call, you see, today is Sunday, so let me quote the Bible. That I think there is in the Bible somewhere they said, for he that much is given, much is expected. I think Ghana has been given a lot. And we have the sea coast. Mali doesn't have a sea coast. Nigeria don't have a sea coast. I'm talking about the West Africa region. There's no other country apart from Nigeria that is endowed with things. Gold, timber, oil, the sea coast, and more importantly, people, which you can also transform into useful human resource to develop in the knowledge age. We have everything. But when you measure in terms of 25 years, forget about the previous years.
Judging down.
Let's just take it from the 25.
Focus on the 25.
Yeah, 25 years. 25 years of the life of Ghana and where we are now. When you look around, a lot of the developmental, the economic, and the transformative, when I say transformative, means that you transform a country with beyond recognition.
Bring impactful change.
Very, very serious impact. The first impact is you must have a dominant impact that is sustainable. You must have a domino effect. That's what we call transformation economy-wise. In fact, when Einstein was asked what was the greatest invention in the 20th century, he said compound interest. Of all the great things he have invented, he said compound interest is the greatest invention of the 20th century. What Einstein means is that, you see, compound interest means that anything that you do must have a compounding effect. That will roll over. You must accumulate. So the nations like Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea, and currently Vietnam have that compound interest impact that have transformed it to where we are now. But for us, for 25 years, we have not had a transformative impact in terms of the development-wise, despite all the endowment we have. The transformative, we didn't have that. And I can bet you, go to some neighborhoods in Ghana, they are worse off than they were 25 years ago. Remember, the population is increasing. Yeah. So we should have done a lot of things to match with that. So democratically, if you say it's about election every 4 years, we are damn good at that.
And we hand over peacefully?
Peacefully, we are good at that too. And we got applause from all over the world as a peaceful nation. But at the end of the day,
it's not translating into the physicals we want to see.
When the guy, as the guy on the street of Ghana now, say, look, 25 years ago compared to now, how do you see your lot? I mean, most of them say, look, I don't think much.
I mean, I can look back at my life 25 years.
Yeah, you might have finished school.
I finished school.
Yes, that is expected. That is expected. So basically for me, on the democratic and the political area, I think we've done well. Developmental, we made some impact. We made some distance. But as I said, much is given to us. What we've achieved, much is expected until we have done that. Transformative, I don't think we are there yet. I will liken our economy to what I call a hat, you know, the village hat, the mad one, with a touch. There are two types of economy. You have the hat economy. Some people call it atakpame, that kind of bidding. Atakpame bidding. So there's atakpame type of economy. There's also called what they call the skyscraper type of economy. Both of them need maintenance. Recently, the Americans have the financial crisis before Obama.
Yeah.
Okay? So they fix it. It's a skyscraper economy, but they managed to fix it. The whole of Europe was thrown into financial crisis. Remember the Malaysians, the East Asia targets also suffered some crisis some time ago. Because they are skyscraper economy, they managed to fix it. And they move on. American economy is now growing very, very fast. But when you come to our Takwame type of economy, little problem, we can solve it because we have not transformed to the level that when we have some little problem, you can fix it. So for me, 25 years, yes, we have not achieved very much. I stand to be corrected.
No, you're okay. Can I?
Yes.
I'd like to take on what he said, and not that I am not in full concurrence, but I'd like to say a few things to kind of mitigate it so that we can put it in context and be able to understand what we're doing, right? They say that life begins at 40. That's one. So you would, in terms of our 25, within that, perhaps semantically say, perhaps these are too early days for us to begin flogging ourselves for our failures. Within the 25 years,
That's enthusiastic, actually.
Yes, within the 25 years, so certain things have happened that we appear not to pay attention to. You see, the First Republic lasted 5 years, 8 months. The Second Republic, 27 months. The Third Republic, 27 months. The fourth, which is the 93, is what we are on now. Now, within those truncations, some things had happened to us, social, political, economically. And these have been impediments in whatever, even though any of the generations of politicians in succession who had the bite at it had their own petty idiosyncrasies and had pursued it. The second people had their own and it was stopped. The third people had their own, it was stopped. It's only the fourth, and even the fourth you have faces. You understand? You realize that the two main political parties have had their bites twice each at the cherry, isn't it? And each of them had, rather than there being a continuum of a national policy for everyone to be obliged to try to promulgate, each came along and turned upside down what the other chap has done. And so we've gone through this syndrome of they were no good, they were corrupt, right? And the other come in. They got it all wrong. We've got it best. They go away, the next person said they were the worst, right? So it's, with respect to the country, it's a question of perhaps with great respect. One armed bandit calling the other child, and then he becomes a two-armed bandit, and then the three-armed bandit, and then the four-armed bandit. You understand it? With great respect, I'm not being rude, but I'm saying just to give it a proper meaning and put it in its place within the history that we're dealing with, that because of those breaks or those breaches, and because we do not have a national consensus policy, which points, America has no permanent friends, but they have a permanent foreign policy. We don't. Development-wise, we don't. They were able to fix it under Obama, but even then you knew there were some roadblocks. He managed it because the nation came along, even though there were two camps, just as we have, main camps, the nation came along and supported it. But it had depended and depends on the leadership's ability to rally the country for something that will be seen by a whole country that, yes, we've gone wrong and this is the direction we must go. Boils down to what Balfour said, discussion, right? But I know that somebody's going to say that the book-long people talk too much and discuss too much and arrive at very little. True, but somehow that is the best way, because they say Jojo is better than war, isn't it? So that is the best way. It's not too late. My second point is culture, because I'm relating it to our references to the Asians, the Asian Tigers, Malaysia. Prof, I beg you, they were not our classmates. They were our peoples. Malaysia, Singapore, all of them. I saw them. This is Flagstaff House over there, right? They came. Lee Kuan Yew and all of them. They came. We taught them here.
Maybe we're ahead of them or what?
We were ahead of them. We were ahead of them.
But they're now ahead of us. That's the whole point.
Please, no. Great that you are now making that intrinsic distinction. Does that occur in the general public mind when anyone begins to attack any government in situ? That we haven't done this, we haven't done that, and look at Malaysia, look at that, Singapore, look at all of them. I'm saying that, no, they were not our mates, we let them. They learned from us. Of course, a pupil or a student can always, surpass his teacher. And for a teacher, your greatest pride is that your student, right, is gone ahead and is achieving. You're very happy, you plead with God to bless him so that he's given you the chance to have been of a little help to him. But that is what we miss. Because over there, they based all policies on their culture. Certain things come from their mores. He was talking about the Atapami sort of economy.
Infrastructure, economy.
We have it basically from of old. Why did we have to change it? And when we changed it, did we know where we were going at that time that we changed it? Was it imposed or did we go for it? From Kwame Nkrumah to date. You understand it? So we need, as a people, as we celebrate this. It's good to celebrate. We should applaud ourselves. Yes, we have done well, but we haven't done well on several issues.
Right, let's hear from Professor Agyeman.
That's a very interesting debate here. But I think the fact that 25 years is a long time in the life of a nation is true. Also, the fact that the so-called Asian Tigers use between 20, 25 to maximum 30 to turn things around is also true. And I think they are instructive, despite the cultural differences and all that.
I'm not denying them.
Exactly.
But all I'm saying is that the comparisons need to be envied by...
Now, you see, for me, the main difference here, for me, is that in those Asian countries we are referring to, they had what you call strong leaders. You're not encumbered by democratic trappings.
That's correct.
Whereas here in Ghana, for the 25 years that we are celebrating, we are what? We say we are democratic, and we are going by democratic principles.
4 in, 4 out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
4 in or 8 on, you're out. Yeah. And not only that, you remember during Rawlings's first term as president, he used to complain quite a bit. In fact, it was more of a diatribe against constitutional rule. But for him, the Constitution encumbered him from doing what he wanted to do. And as recently as President Mohammed's time also, he was quick to say that, look, we are not in a military rule for me to throw people in jail without the due processes. You see, in those Asian countries, those were non-issues, you see. So that helped them. That's why these days, people are even beginning to question whether this kind of democracy is one that can really take us into development. Rwanda, for us, today in Africa, the best, I guess, what everybody refers to as developing very well, is Rwanda and Ethiopia. And these two countries are by no means democratic the way we have embraced it here. So I think for me, these are the differences. But having said that, I think we must also remember that democratic institutions can be as good as the people who head them, the leadership and the personnel. Just as a democratic country can be as good as democratic as the leaders who drive it. So let us look at the people. And here, I may be even questioning our quality as citizens, okay? I want to stress, and I mentioned that earlier, the kind of the quality people we produce for our country. Yeah. And this comes from many angles. Take our schools. I'm happy Nana Ado has introduced the SHS. Free SHS. Thank you for the correction. But I'll be happier if we get to know the content of the educational materials we are going to teach our people, because it's the content of our education
and what our SS graduates
Thank
makeup
you.
will be at the
That
end.
is what is going to determine the future leadership and the quality of personnel.
That's
that
what's going to champion the
precisely,
transformative agenda
precisely.
he talks about.
And if you look at those countries that have developed that we are referred to, you go to these countries and look at the educational systems and the structures.
Fantastic.
They deliberately tailor the education to produce certain individuals who can run the country that they want to have. For me, that is critical. But all these years, we have not bothered, except the fact that politicians play football with our educational systems. We want 4, we want 2, we want quality, we want immediate, all kinds of things. And the victims become what? Not the children that we are destroying, but the country in the long run. Because if we think that we have poor quality political leadership in this country, they are not from Mars. They are from within ourselves. So we have to question our system and how we produce them. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have to begin to place emphasis on the quality of our education, because that produces the kind of characters that we need. So if you are talking about integrity, people would value systems that promote democracy and development. People values that will not go for corruption, goat and sheep and yam for in exchange of
people
justice.
that hold themselves accountable
Precisely.
while holding others
That's
accountable
the kind
too.
of people we are lacking. So when we bemoan the issue of corruption and mismanagement of this, and I begin to look at ourselves. Because, look, 25 years is long, I agree with you. But we need to begin to find something to turn ourselves
But Prof, within the 25 years, we've also discovered oil, for example, which was expected to become a catalyst to push us forward. That hasn't happened?
If you go that way,
And I
there'll
want
be
to take
trouble. What have we got from that oil?
Have we not got anything?
Tell me.
subsidizing
Let's tell the
salary
country.
payments.
Subsidizing others with what God has given us at long last. We sign ourselves to do that. That's why I say don't go there at all. Because if you went there, there'll be trouble. I'm sorry. I mean, let's stick with, say, quality. We know, historically, the YT, when, you know what I mean by YT?
Yes, please.
YT's education system was to turn us into graduate, right? Civil servants, right? But open.
Yeah.
The old elders described it, right? Clerk officers and the rest. You understand it? So we're all educated in that straitjacket. We've come a long way since 57 that we ought to have been able to say to ourselves,
Enough of that.
enough of that. Let's be very practical. Quite practical. Example, you remember the Takwa mines? That school of mines. You know it?
Yes, I do.
What does it become now? University, isn't it?
Yes.
Why did Kwame Nkrumah think ahead and say that, let's begin to do that? And in fact, what is the pivotal reason for establishing University of Science and Technology? And so on and so forth to Winneba. All of these things were supposed to turn it inside out so that we really will derive the quality of educated persons, and with that quality, we will turn out quality leaders. People who will not speak promises and not deliver, but people who will really be men, what the poets call it, men who have honor and men for whom the lust of office cannot buy. We've not been able to do that. So the thing is, inherent in us, we have bred this. So if we're celebrating rightly 25, no matter what it is, then we better sit down as a nation and begin to think about these things, that we haven't got the material for leadership, we haven't got the quality, we haven't got the ethical, we haven't got the cultural imbuements in all of us, from the crèche, kindergarten, right to the top. How do we do it? It can be done.
How do we do it?
It's nothing that is difficult. It can be done. We can do it. But let's face it that, look, we have, yes, applauding ourselves for 25, of course, but the applause must be tempered with the sober thinking that these are challenges that we have neglected inadvertently, perhaps.
Professor Jidono, I will be going for a break, but I want you to put this in a short few words before, so when we go, we'll return, we'll discuss. 25 years gone. Now, the next 25 years, what should be the benchmarks that we should be seeking to guide us into it, to push us forward, so that all the negativities that we have experienced from Nkrumah time through this 25 years of the Fourth Republic will be mitigated, will be fixed?
Very good. On the two dimensions, the two other dimensions that I said we're not doing very well, that's the development side and the transformative side. For us to get there, we first must recognize that it doesn't matter how fast you run in the wrong direction, you're going to hit the wrong destination.
So we need
the
to
next 25 years, we are going to continue to hit the wrong destination unless we do something very, very seriously on the leadership side, on the whole agenda. Professor Ajimandua make a very important point. It's something we shy away from. You see, those countries that we say they are our classmates or people we led or whatever, okay, they have something unique that we don't have. Okay? It's not our effort. It's not the effort. When you look at Malaysia, they have one dominant party running the country for a number of years. So there's consistency in policy and plans. Okay? You may say, oh, democracy is not correct. That's not what we're talking about. The same thing with Singapore. The same thing with South Korea for so many, many years. The same thing with Japan for so many, many years. Even China. You see, there's something in there. Okay? Now, we got a constitution. Every 4 years, you must go back to seek mandate or pack and go. And then the other guys come, and they change everything. Even change people to a level of directors in companies. We are doing that. You see, the Americans pack and go in 4 years or 8 years because they are already a mature system. In fact, America can run without a president. System can run because they have the institutions. Okay, they know exactly what they're doing. But we are still maturing. Now, if you say we are lumped with this 4 year business, then I agree with him. We must bear that in mind that there are some untouchables. There's a plan, a direction. As I said, it doesn't matter how fast you run in the wrong direction, you reach the wrong destination. Then what is the right direction? We agree on that, that is untouchable.
Right direction.
So
right
basically, to me, if we don't do that, the next 25 years, if some of us are still around here, we'll still come here and say that we are still down here.
Right, this is agenda. And we have Professors Jidono and Professor Ajimandua and Sophie Kundia joining us for very interesting discussion. We'll take a break, and when we return, we'll delve into what the next 25 years should look like if we're expected to change who we are today as a... Welcome back to Agenda. We're discussing 25 years of the Fourth Republic progress, problems, and prospects. We have three professors. We have so far had very interesting discussion. We hope we could have made it 2 hours of discussion, but Professor Ajimandua, Bafo Ajimandua, is the CEO of the John Agyekum Kufuor Foundation and former senior advisor at the United Nations. Professor Clement Jidono is president of the Accra Institute of Technology, AIT, and Professor Nana Esrufi Kundia is a political historian and chair of journalism, African University College at AUCC. He actually taught me why service. I always say it, and I'm glad to have him here. Right, so let me continue the discussion with you, Professor Ajimandua. 25 years on, I asked Professor Jidono to lay the foundation of what we're expected to do to make sure that the next 25 years we don't come back here and we have some forms of regrets in how our economy has improved, how our people have advanced, and how we even judge ourselves. What should we be doing?
Well, I think I've touched on what one may call the software of development, which is the human resource quality and all that. I think going forward, we have to revisit the Constitution. And I say this for a reason. Because we are constrained by the Constitution in terms of our political practice in the country.
Our hands are tied.
Our hands are tied by what the Constitution says. And all of us know. And just recently, I laid my hands on a piece by the chairman of the committee of experts that drafted or assisted in drafting the Constitution of 1992, Nana SKB Asante. And he made some very interesting revelations, pointing out the defects in the current Constitution and how they came about. Some of them without the knowledge of even the Constituent Assembly, because some of them were kind of privately negotiated and thrown into the Constitution for the plebiscite, or, you know. So I think all of us over the years have been bemoaning the fact that the Constitution as structure gives undue, what one may say, excessive powers to the president. Some people refer to that as the monarchical executive. I prefer to call it the imperial presidency. It's not the doing of the sitting president or the past presidents. It's the Constitution that makes them so. So why don't we revisit the Constitution? Secondly, we also know that the issue of accountability and transparency on the part of government has been weakened by the way we have structured the legislature, the fusion arrangements, where the Constitution requires a president to appoint the majority of his cabinet from Parliament. That delimits the capacity of Parliament to effectively check the executive. And we can go on and cite so many things. And of course, when we're talking about participation, we also know that the way our district administrations have been structured, it doesn't allow effective participation at the grassroots. That's why the whole notion of decentralization, which is written into the Constitution, comes about. And yet, over the years, all governments, NPP and DC, when they are out of power, they clamor for more effective decentralization, leading to the election of DCEs.
And the rest.
When they are in government, they backpedal, and then before you know it, the matter is dead. It's so with all these two leading political parties. So my point is that the effort that was initiated by former President Atta Mills to review the Constitution, which proceeded very nicely, but unfortunately, even when the report was submitted, the government at the time chose what it wanted and threw away what it didn't, even though the people themselves have spoken loudly on what they wanted. You see, so I think there's a need to revisit the Constitution in a very bipartisan way, placing the interest of this country above all parochial interest, and really review the Constitution to rectify these lapses that do not allow us to really practice our system well. Because unfortunately, whether we like it or not, we cannot go the Malaysian way, we cannot go the Singaporean way, we cannot go the Kagame Rwanda way.
We can only go the Ghana way.
The Ghana way.
And what is the Ghana way?
And Ghana way is that we have a constitution that imposes a 10-year limitation. A constitution that provides certain institutions, and these institutions can only be as good as the people we placed ahead of them. So these are the things. So I'm arguing now that whilst I'm very concerned about the quality of the human resource base leading to appointments and positions and all that, I'm also saying those that we can help to recraft, especially the Constitution, to begin to place certain impediments in the way. If you talk of corruption, for instance, the Constitution should close all those opportunities that exist for corruption. If those opportunities are not there, and there's a punitive sanctions or measures against that, I think people will be different. My final point going to the future, and that's one of the, for me, one of the downsides of our governance, the inability to enforce the law. I don't know of any democratic society on this planet
where law enforcement is so bad like ours.
No, nowhere. All of us, we travel. And you know what it is to go to Britain or any part of Europe, to go to America or anywhere, to go to Japan or anywhere, to go to Korea and other places. You don't see what goes on in this country, only because our law enforcement structures and systems simply do not work. And that is dangerous. Because if you drive the streets of Accra or anywhere else in this country, if you work anywhere in this country, nobody respects the law, including the policemen who are paid to enforce the law. So this, for me, is another important issue we need to pick up as we embark on the next 25 years of our democratic journey.
Professor Jidono, we have a short time for you to continue where you left off.
Yes, for me, basically, it is very important for us to recognize where we are and how we got here. That's the first thing. I don't think we agree on, as a nation, as people, on actually where we are. Some people will tell you that we are the damn good. Everything's okay. But some of us, we don't. Probably you compare yourself to the people who you are surpassed, not the people who have surpassed you. That's the first point. Also, we also want to agree, we also need to agree as people what exactly this is all about. You see, our politics have now metamorphosed into something else. Okay? And let them insult this guy, tell him story about him, get that, get a position, do whatever,
deny,
yes, do this, do that, and then that's it. What is this all about? Why we cast our eye on where we came from. Okay, so for me, it's very clear that we don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that we are not there yet, and we are not only on the right road to get there. We are doing some few things here, patching things here. Take, for example, school feeding program. I'm not against school feeding program. You see, the fact that you are instituting a program to feed kids to go to school, it means there's something wrong with your economy. Which parent will not feed their kids to go to school? Why are the parents not capable of feeding their kids to go to school? After all these years of independence, it means that there is something in your economy which is preventing your people to go to school. So politicians think that before they go, they have a social intervention. That is everything. No. Social intervention is because of failure of the economy. Okay? Even the free HSS program we are putting in place. Great program. Where are this time for so many years of independence? You know, some of us benefit from free education. Way back, then it was stopped. At the end of the day, it was brought back again. Why is that necessary? I mean, you need social intervention. So a lot of things we do is social mitigations, not actually things which actually grow the cake, so that we should all, don't need to be assisted. So for me, we need to establish what is this all about. And then we have an agreement on it, not this political thing, you, NPP, NDC, but as I can tell you now, we are still playing the usual game. In the next 25 years, it will continue with that until we are clear what is all about.
Until we have a plan and
a
direction.
Plan to implement it.
Professor Kundua, we have a minute or so for you to tell us what your view is. The next 25 years, what should our focus as a country and our people be?
Fortunately, I expect by that next 25 years, I'll be 97. I wouldn't be here.
You will be, Nana.
I wouldn't be here. And the other thing is it 97, 80, 82, 25? No, it will be 107, isn't it?
Yeah.
No.
No. You'll be here. The most important thing is you will be here.
No, the important thing is that we have been, since independence, been on an odyssey. I don't think even Homer put a time frame on the Iliad. But having said that, the odyssey that I'm talking about is that we haven't as yet found out who we are, what we want to become, and how we want to get there. So as long as we tinkle and canter with it, we're not going to get it. But I do hope that this small contribution from us would have kindled some minds. And then, because you see, I'm seeing, if you look at the close of the year, and people's attitude complain about merely the market, what it was during this Christmas marketing or buying. It seems to me that the country might be unfortunately veering back to the late 70s, which gave a champion the chance to propose Unigolf. Because at that time, I can say, the people had become disappointed, disillusioned, and dejected of politics and all politicians. We can't get to them because, as we said, we can't be any other than what we want a Ghanaian democracy to be. Let's hope we're going to be.
Right, Prof, we're grateful for your time. Professor Sylvie Kundua, Professor Clement Jidonu, and Professor Bafo Agyeman. We've had an interesting discussion on agenda. I'm Stephen Enti. Thanks for staying with us. Enjoy the rest of our programs.